Hey there, I'm Jenn Rice, and I wanted to come in and talk tonight. It's kind of a heavy subject, but I'm going to try to break it down to really just one toxin I want to focus on. I was last week at the Integrative Healthcare Symposium in New York City, and I have the privilege of listening to Dr. Joseph Pizzorno, who's a naturopathic physician, and he's been practicing since 1975. So that's been a long time, right? So it was a great lecture because he was talking about, he wrote the book on toxins, which I can pop in the comments. And, you know, in the past, I would have maybe looked at something like that and thought, oh, yeah, that sounds kind of gimmicky, or maybe it's a little political, or who knows what. But after kind of going through my own health issue last summer, I started to look more at the reasons that disease states happen within patients and even within myself. And so one thing we've come to find is that, and Dr. Pizzorno will say that when he practiced medicine back in the 70s and 80s, he was seeing patients and he could tell that they were having certain diseases that would come up from like poor behaviors, like lifestyle behaviors, maybe drinking too much, smoking too much, not working out, that kind of thing. But what he sees nowadays is diseases that seem to come from more environmental factors or things in our environment around us. And about, I would say he says about 70% of the conditions that he's seeing now can be strongly linked to environmental toxins. And one toxin in particular, and I won't go through all of them, although there were several he listed, and I think they're worth going through at some point. But tonight I wanted to focus on arsenic because, guys, I was sitting there like, arsenic? What is, is that even an issue at this point? I mean, I thought that's like something from, I don't know, the movies or whatever, and maybe I've just been out of the loop. I mean, I've been practicing medicine for almost 13 years now, but clearly I haven't heard a lot about toxins, and I've been doing reactive medicine, which is normally what we do in Western medicine. Someone comes in, maybe they have a rash or they have a cough or cold, and we fix the symptoms or give them help with symptoms, write a prescription, and off they go. But we're not really getting down to the root of the problem. And when I was exposed myself to functional medicine this last summer, the way I ate prior to going to this doctor this summer was absolutely killing me slowly, right? So it's not to say that you have to do, the big change like I did, but even taking some certain things into consideration that I never even thought of before could be helpful for you. So one thing he talks about with arsenic, which I did not realize, was and I see you guys jumping on. Thanks for being here tonight. If you live where, he was saying Maine in particular, the state of Maine, they have very high levels of arsenic in the water, so the natural groundwater, for whatever reason. Many cities and places throughout the U.S. actually do have high arsenic levels, and he says only about 50% of municipalities are testing these levels, and the levels do not have to be, let's just say there's a lot of wiggle room in what's considered worrisome. So, okay, if you're drinking bottled water or you're drinking a certain water that you love to buy that you feel very happy with, you're probably still getting some type of exposure and contaminant to it. And so he does recommend when he has a sick patient come in, maybe it's through, maybe they're having neurological issues like the early stages of Parkinson's, ADHD, ADD, let's face it, anxiety, depression, those are all neurologically based, right? So when he has a patient come in and they start talking about things in their environment, he actually does ask them to have their water tested. And I'm not saying we all got to run out and get our water tested, but I think that the data that he provided from the state of Maine in particular was a little bit, alarming. And what they're seeing too is that there's actually, and this blew me away, that there's a decrease in IQ now because of toxin exposure, things in our environment. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, this is great, Jed. Like, now I'm depressed. I'm going to turn you off and go get something to eat or drink. But what he said was that not only can we monitor things a little bit better in our environment and be aware of what the toxins are, but we can also kind of steer clear of buying things and getting products that maybe contain more toxins. So one thing we can do, he's saying that about 70% of an average person's toxins are coming from food, right? So if we're accumulating toxins in the body, it's absolutely, most of it's derived from the foods that we're eating. So what we want to do is make sure that we're not consuming foods that are heavily coated in pesticides. I did not realize that the wheat is even sprayed before it's harvested because it makes it easier to get off the stalk, I guess it's called. So what I think is the best way that we can go about changing what we're eating and starting really slow is to just kind of take a look at what we're already buying and decide, is this organic? Is it not? We should probably be getting things that are organic. Is this something that is considered like a dirty fruit or vegetable, meaning that it doesn't have a shell, like a banana has a shell, right? And you can peel that away. An orange has a peel that you can take off. So those aren't as important as something like an apple, berries, that kind of thing. And so buying organic is going to be key. If you are not feeling well and you've had issues like chronic fatigue, neurological symptoms, even anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, this can also lead to, they're tracking this to Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. It's quite, it's a bit alarming, because if it really is the arsenic in a water supply, it's important to know that. So I'm happy to pop in some resources for, arsenic testing. And I think that it's worth doing if you or someone in your family has been struggling with any kind of chronic illness, and also if you want to stave off something like that from the future. And he recommended that if you live in the state of Maine, you should absolutely be testing your water. But as far as toxins go, we can't live in a bubble. I'm definitely not someone that's an alarmist. I don't think that, it's unreasonable to kind of go overboard with it, but there are small things that we can do and choose that will make a big difference in the food that we eat and buy. And as we start a movement that actually is caring more about these things, we will make an impact on the whole commerce around it. So the food industry, and Dr. Mark Hyman was another speaker there. And if any of you guys have ever followed him, he's been a big proponent against, he's against the big food companies that have kind of really made it difficult for the food labelings to get correct. So if you ever want to follow him, he has some great information. He actually has a new book that's coming out called What the Heck Should I Eat? Because it's very confusing, right? And we want to give good information and empower people. And even Dr. Pizzorno was saying the best thing we can do is to help people be as healthy as they can. And so that can be either through knowledge, of course, and also if we can encourage the food companies to be more transparent about what's actually on the labels. And if we don't really trust what is on there, buying from sources that we're more familiar with. So I didn't want to get into every toxin, because actually the pesticides are probably one of the biggest ones. And as I sit out here with all of our lovely grass and greenery here in Florida, we do a lot of spraying, we have a lot of pesticides, a lot of exposure, and we don't really realize that this is happening around us. But there are ways to kind of mitigate this a bit, and there are things that we can do for ourselves that help to kind of not really detox, but get rid of it. So one thing he suggested too is if you're exercising, to kind of turn it up a little bit, and you want to make sure you're breaking a sweat, kind of clear. That's a natural way for the body to detoxify, right? And then drinking plenty of fluids, and more towards the, of course, non-soda, but we're talking like green tea, water, not sweetened beverages, that kind of thing. So when I come back on, I think I'll come on either tomorrow or the next day, and I want to take a deeper dive into the toxins he talked about that had to do with some of the food we eat and some of the suggestions around that. And what I don't want to do is provide information that creates fear. I want us to create a dialogue of solutions and certain action steps that we can take as consumers, as individuals, and certainly if you're a healthcare provider. A lot of the disease conditions that we see in clinic day in and day out are absolutely linked to the way the patient is living and what they're eating. And to not acknowledge that at all isn't really doing our patients very good service. I realize we're under time constraints and we don't have time to maybe go through a lot of these things, but I think we need to empower them with good diet plans. And if any of you guys are already doing that, I'd love to hear how you're incorporating that with your practice. And if you like this content, please consider going to my website, jennriceinternational.com. I'm going to be launching a place where we can exchange this information a little bit more freely than maybe on my Facebook Live, of course, and a place where we have sort of a sense of community where we can really get information to one another in a timely way, as well as empowering each other to kind of step into this healthy lifestyle, one that is anti-inflammatory, one that does fix us really from the inside out, right? So thank you guys so much for jumping on tonight. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments. And if you know someone that might benefit from this information, please consider sharing it with them. And I hope you guys have a great night.